So should you wait for the Z50 Mark II or should you get the Z50 as it is right now? The answer depends on what you expect from the Z50 Mark II and what the Z50 is right now today. See, there are only three ways, in my view, there are only three ways that the Z50 can be improved if there is a version 2 of the same camera. You can have faster autofocus, bring all the learning from the Z9 into the Z50, maybe a slightly faster processor. Of course, you're not going to get the exact same processor. You'll have probably the same version of the processor, but with lesser number of CPUs and GPUs and all that. But yeah, you can have a faster autofocus and then you can add IBIS to it. The third thing that can be added to the Z50 Mark II is adding better color profiles, better video codecs. For example, 10-bit internally, 422 or even 420, but 10-bit. Those things can be added and those things can make the Z50 version 2 a very powerful camera. The question is, what does it then become? See, if you look at the Sony line, that gives us a good point of reference. If you look at the A6400, it's very similar to the Z50 or the Sony XT30. It's very similar to the Z50. They do not have IBIS. The autofocus is quite good on the Sony, of course. The Fuji is okay, almost as good as the Z50. There's not much difference between the Fuji XT30 and the Z50. Now these bodies have IBIS. Now these bodies have internal 10-bit color. Now, although the Sony has log and the Fuji has log profile in them, but the moment you add an IBIS, you get on the Fuji system, you get something like an XS10, which is about $250 more expensive. Same with the Sony A6600. So if you add the IBIS, the autofocus can be figured out with just software and stuff like that, and maybe a better processor also, which could be more expensive. But adding 10-bit color and adding IBIS will make the camera more expensive. Then, if you look at a Z50 version 2 that has all three, it's going to be far more expensive than the Z50. So the whole reason of looking at a slightly more moderately priced camera, which is more affordable and therefore relevant to a very wide audience and probably to you, the Mark II becomes a bit irrelevant the moment this camera goes beyond $1,200. I think it starts becoming irrelevant to the audience that is attracted by something like a Z50 today. If you just add a faster focusing performance to it, and don't add the IBIS, do not add the 10-bit internal color, I think you may have a camera within about $1,100, and that's good. But I think in DSLR terms, it's about a D7500, not D7200. And the D7500 is a pretty good mid-range camera, a smaller brother of the D500. But it's not a cheap camera. It's not priced similarly to the Z50. You see, Z50 is the cheapest Z line of cameras, right? And the ZFC is already telling you with a little bit of more improvement where the pricing can move. It's already $150 more, the ZFC. So I think if you look at the price and performance ratio, the combination, that's very important to keep in mind. And from that perspective, the Z50 is very sweetly positioned. It's just at the right, balance. It just maintains that very beautiful balance between what it can do and how much it costs you. Right now, the Z50 can be had used second hand, and there's a fantastic dual lens kit. The DX lenses are doing very well. I'm shooting this camera is a Z50 with the new firmware with the Viltrox 50mm 1.4, and this is a wonderful setup. As you can see, this is very good in video focusing. This is very smooth, very nice, light, tiny, beautiful camera. After the recent firmware update, the Z50 has turned out to be a very potent camera for slightly more fast action shooting and in situations where things are more rapid. Now, when the Z50 came out first, it was already snappier than the Z6. Coming back to the whole question of whether there's going to be a Mark II. I mean, we've talked about if there's a Mark II, what it can potentially become. And with these improvements, adding the IPs, 10-bit internal color, and much faster autofocus, you're looking at something like the D500. That's not the same league as the Z50. So it may not, with all those things added, it may not be a Z50 anymore. It's probably going to be something like a Z70 or Z80 and all that. Now, if you come back to what the Z50 is today, it has turned out to be a very good camera. I mean, it was already a much snappier camera when it was launched. It was better than the Z6 in terms of autofocus. And you see, there was a reason for Nikon to upgrade and give an upgrade for the Z6 in the form of the Z6 II or the Z7 II for Z7. And for Canon, they had enough reason to upgrade and give you a M50 Mark II, because the first generation of the Z cameras and Canon M50, they had some limitations which was irksome for some people, right? Like not having the dual card in the Z bodies and having so much crop for in video for the Canon M50. Like, so they had to really upgrade. They were like small fixes. The generation twos were small fixes. We don't need that kind of a fix for the Z50. For the user, for the segment, having a single card slot, weather sealed, no IBIS. But you know what? When you have a small sensor, you don't have as much camera shake, because look at this. Okay, this is, if you look at this entire surface, and let's say when you're holding this like that, and because you have a wide surface, the movement at the corner is accentuated because there's more movement. But imagine, look at only the center. The center will not move as much. Here, the forward and backward movement is not as much. So when you have a smaller sensor camera, you do not have as much camera shake. So I use the Z50, the XT3. I don't care about not having an IBIS unless you're shooting video. But when you're shooting video, you have that, kit lenses, those kit lenses that have VR included in them. So if you have lens VR, it's pretty decent. Nikon has recently released so many good lenses for the APS-C bodies, especially the zooms. Viltrox is supporting the system very well with these primes, the full frame 35mm, 50mm, and 85mm equivalent lenses. They're really good. So I think all in all, if you need a camera today, if you want the Nikon performance right now and a very nice, well-built, weather-sealed body, and plus the Z50 also has a flip out. It's also got an inbuilt flash. So looking at everything, looking at the future, looking at what you have today, I think it's a good decision to just go ahead and get the Z50 today instead of waiting for a Z50 Mark II or maybe a Z70, which may be a lot more expensive and may not be relevant to you when it comes to pricing. And a real replacement of Z50 may come well into the future, maybe 2 years down the line, where Nikon thinks that, look, I have to put another product and refresh the Z50 for this price segment. I don't think there is any teething problem in the Z50 currently, because if it comes to sports shooter, they'll probably look for something higher performance than the Z50, right? Z50 is almost like a D5600 or at max D7200. It's not a D7500, which is a middle of the road, do it all APS-C camera, which you can take out and do some birding. It's not that camera. If you want that, you'll have to shell out more money. So then wait for the Z70/Z50 Mark II. But if it's not that, if you're looking for an everyday camera that's going to be a lot of fun using, good, well-built, well-rounded, solid camera with enough support from the rest of the, when it comes to lenses, and something that you can buy cheap today instead of wasting these months, these times that you can go out and shoot and experience the camera, I think you should just go ahead and get a used Z50. And if you don't like getting things used, if it's your first camera or maybe the second one, and if you really want your camera to be special, then go and get a new one. But I think that's what I would do, and that is exactly why I got the Z50 for my brother, and he's absolutely extremely happy with it. I'll post more videos and do some comparisons with the XS10 and the XT3 very soon. So subscribe, like this video if you like this, if this has been of any use to you. and see you very soon with another video.